Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish, and publish your book. I'm Mark DeVoe.
And I am Mark Stay. And this episode is brought to you by everyone who supports this podcast. There are people on Patreon, there are people at the Bestseller Academy, and there are the wonderful listeners that are listening to the show right now. We thank you all from the bottom of our hearts. The show simply couldn't happen without your help. Mr. D, how are you today, sir?
I'm good. You know, it was a bit of a rush this morning, Mark, because I had to squeeze in my 200 words before the podcast. Got up, got the kids to the bus, got my 200 words in, and here we are. And it was a good morning. A good morning. Do you know what I love about doing 200 words first thing is it's a real sense of satisfaction of knowing that the rest of the day now can go completely pear-shaped, including this podcast, but got my 200 words banked. So have you been writing this week, or are you in editing phases? What are you up to?
No, I'm just at the tipping point where I slide down into the third act of the book that I'm working on. So I'm writing every day. I'm banking my words every day. I wrote later than usual today because I was up at 5 a.m. this morning because I had to drive my son into London because he's filming something, and the call was so early that there weren't any trains. So I had to drive him into Blimmin' Wandsworth this morning to do his thing. And then I got home, and then I had to do... this is my third recording today, so I'm doing things for like London Book Fair and stuff like that, pre-records. So I managed to squeeze in between sort of 11 and noon a good 560 words or something. So a bit frazzled today. Listeners,
I'll tell you what, there's definitely something called Zoom fatigue, isn't there? But we're going to be hearing an incredible interview later with the amazing Nadine Matheson, who also manages to squeeze in her words around an incredibly busy job. Yeah. And so this episode is dedicated to everyone out in the world who says that they are too busy to write. And my big question to everyone out there that lives by that rule is, when are you ever going to be less busy? Like when's it ever going to happen? You know, I listen to my parents talk about retirement, and they always say these words: we've never been busier. We don't know how we managed to squeeze work in. So 200 words a day, it is the savior of that. We can get rid of those excuses, because if you write 200 words a day, you write a book in a year. The average book published is around 70,000 words, and 200 words a day will get you 72,000-ish words a year. And it takes literally 10 to 15 minutes. And that's the bit that amazes me, is how those words kind of continue to build and build on each other. But for anyone listening who's never done this before, the secret is that 200 words never actually is 200 words. I never write really 200 words. I'll either write 250. I wrote 1,040 the other day, 560 yesterday. And you stand back, don't you? You think, blimey, what do you think you average, Mark, on a day when you sit down to aim for 200? Do you typically go over by quite a lot?
I guess I'm averaging about 1,000 words a day. On project one, and then there's usually project two, but then I'm full time, so I have a big advantage. I know there are a lot of people. There's a couple of people in the BXP group on Facebook who have very young children, and but they're still writing. They're exhausted, but they're still writing, because that 200 words a day is, as you say, 15-20 minutes, handwritten, scribbled down, whatever. You know, it can be done. I'm not going to pretend it's easy for a moment if you've got a small child, or you've got, you know, a member of the family is ill, or other troubles. But it can be done. The thing is, when you hear people saying, "Oh, I do 1,000 words a day, 2,000 words a day, 3,000," you feel you have to keep up, and there is that pressure. And we talked to Nadine about NanoWriMo and things like that, and NanoWriMo is, you know, very intense, and you kind of think, "Oh, I'll do it all in a month," but it's really stressful. And I think if you can make that 200 part of your day, find that, because it is, as we've said, you know, it's the equivalent of, however, you know, a few emails. It's the equivalent of, you know, so it can be done. And if you're just getting words down, if you're just as you know, as we said with Dean Wesley Smith, our guest a few weeks ago, and we'll talk about some of the reaction we had to that in social media at the end of the show, which is fun. You know, if you're just writing in the dark, if you're just getting words down, if you've got a pen and a notebook, Not the laptop. The laptop can be really intimidating because you got that winking cursor. Or if you've got a phone, you've got the Notes app on your phone. You can get those words down a lot more quickly than you think. And it's that thing. I was doing an interview this morning for London Book Fair, and there was an author, debut author on there. And he was saying that thing for him is writing daily. It's that momentum. It's that momentum of writing a little bit every day. And just this week, I finished the fourth and final short story in what is now known as the Miss Charlotte Quartet, which is a spin-off series that I started as a writing exercise to get me out of a funk during the first lockdown happened. Like a lot of people, I was just completely bewildered by it. It took the wind out of my sails. And I had a second book to deliver. I was under contract. I figured, oh God, I've got to write a book over the next few months. But it just seemed like, how am I going to do this with all this weird stuff going on? So I thought, you know what, I'm going to write some short stories set in the same world, just with, I'll have a play and see how it goes. I'll just do 200 words a day. And that's how it's on that sofa there with my feet up and a notepad. I thought, okay. And now it's over 25,000 words, short story, 4 short stories, all free if you sign up to my newsletter, folks. Go to witchesofwoodville.com. And it's now an amazing thing. And I've done audiobook versions and what have you. So it's kind of blown my mind a little bit. And a big thank you, I must say, to Julian Barr, my editor, and Andy Bowden, who did the cover art. They've just been absolutely amazing. And anyone who's downloaded a copy so far. But all of that just came out of me thinking, okay, let's just write something. So you never know where it's going to end up.
Write something, anything. And the most important thing, first and foremost, is get the words down, no matter how good or bad you think they are, because they can always be improved. But a blank page can't be improved. The covers, absolutely. By the way, of your books, I've noticed you popping them up on the group there, look absolutely fantastic. Really great. Another thing to announce, which I'm really excited about, is June in the Bestseller Academy. Well, I should also say, just to finish off that last segment, is if you want to join the 200 word challenge, it is 200wordchallenge.com. If you're doing it, please tweet about it. Tell us how it's affecting your writing, how it's helped you. Have you finished a book using it? We want to know about that. We're going to start promoting the books that have been completed in the 200 word challenge. And if you're doing it and you know someone else that might benefit from it, tell them about it. Please get them involved. And one of the reasons why that's important is the other thing I was about to mention, which is June is Accountability Month in the Bestseller Academy. The Academy is our premium program for people who are looking to join an incredibly inspiring group of people and need accountability to get that book finished. And we're going to be doing accountability partnerships, which is a new thing we're introducing into the Academy, which I'm super excited about, because weirdly enough, the 200 word challenge started as an experiment that I did a year and a half ago, and we actually started with accountability partners. And the idea is that you basically would find a partner, and you would have to text or message them each day your word count. I'm going to go deeper into that in July and August, tell people on the podcast what we discover through that. But some of the statistics we found from the original trial were mind-blowing. Mm-hmm. And I think this is possibly the missing piece. So if you're part of the Academy, that's something to look out for and be excited about. Or if you're looking for accountability, especially an accountability partner, then consider joining the Bestseller Academy. We're opening the doors. And the new entrance, if you like, for the Academy will be starting on the 1st of July. So that's the deadline, folks. If you want to sign up to the Academy, you need to get over to academy.bestsellerexperiment.com before the end of June. That is now the deadline. So the doors will be closing then. Mark, let's dive into our interview, because this is brilliant. Tell us about Nadine, who just is such an inspiring character.
Yes, Nadine Matheson was born and lives in London and is a criminal solicitor. Full-time job, like you say. That's not a part-time job. That's not something, that you can just wander in and out of. That is a career. In 2016, she won the City University Crime Writing Competition and completed an MA at City University of London. And her crime novel, The Jigsaw Man, was published by HQ HarperCollins in February 2021, which is when we recorded this. So this is, listeners, we have a bit of a backlog of interviews. So, but I'm glad we've taken this long for this one to go live for reasons I will discuss after the interview. But we talk about launching in lockdown, because I did that too. We talk about publisher auctions, diversity, writing about where you live, NanoWriMo, self-publishing her first book and the lessons she learned from that, managing the work-writing balance, and I must say, I didn't prompt her to say any of this. She completely said, you'll listen to this and think, this sounds familiar, but this is completely Nadine. And we talk about writing every day. Oh, and just a word of warning, I do read out a particularly gruesome bit of her book. So if that's blood and guts is not your thing, just skip forward. It's only a minute, skip forward a minute, and then everything will be back to normal. But you do not want to miss out on the rest of this.
Brilliant stuff. So let's have a listen to Mark chatting to the wonderful and delightful Nadine Matheson.
Nadine Matheson, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today?
Mark, I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me, firstly.
Oh, we're very, very excited. We're here to talk about your crime novel, The Jigsaw Man, and all sorts of other stuff. But first of all, we're recording this. It's February now, so people listen to this. There's probably sun shining, what have you. But we're in the middle of lockdown. My book came out a week ago. Your book is coming out this week. We're launching books in the mid when all the bookshops are closed, which is wonderful.
Everything's closed.
How is it launching a book like this in lockdown? What's your experience so far?
It's so strange because I thought when we first went into lockdown last year, I thought by the time we came round to my launch date on the 18th, I thought it'd be fine. We'll all be out. And then the government decided to put us back into lockdown. And I was like, oh, okay. So it's not going to be, I'm not going to have a little party and fairy cakes and champagne by the river. I'm going to be at home in my front room. Which is where it's going to be. So, and because this is like the one that's being traditionally published, I think you have this idea of how publishing launch parties should be. And when you realise it's actually going to take place in your front room on Zoom. But I'm going to make the most of it. I'm going to make the most of it.
At least you can do it in your gym jams. That's an option. You know, you can be comfy. Yeah. But let's talk about The Jigsaw Man. Tell us about The Jigsaw Man, because it's such a fun read. Listeners, if you love pacey thrills, you are in for such a treat with this.
Thank you so much. Well, The Jigsaw Man is, obviously it's a crime thriller, and it's set in southeast London. And it starts when my Detective Inspector Angelica Henley, she's basically back at work. She'd been signed off for basically a bit of stress. And she has to start a new investigation when body parts are found washed up on the banks of the River Thames. And when she gets to the banks of the River Thames, not only does she find the body parts, she also has a new partner, and she's not too keen on having a new partner. His name's Salim Ramuta. And then when she gets to the river, she discovers that it matches the MO of a killer called a Jigsaw Killer, but he's currently serving a life sentence in prison. And so she quickly realises that she's dealing with a copycat. And at some point in the book, she has to ask the Jigsaw Killer, who's Olivier, for help. And he doesn't take too kindly to knowing there's a copycat out there. And so he escapes. So Henley finds herself pursuing not just one killer, but two killers.
It's fantastic. Brilliant. They're going to be people out there, you're going to have two audiences out there. When they hear the words body parts, right, there are some who are going to go, oh, God, oh, no. And there are some who are going to go, oh, tell me more. So you're obviously one of those readers. You like a bit of dismemberment.
I like a little bit of dismemberment. And I think if you're writing a police procedural and you're involving serial killers, I think you should expect a body part or two. So, but for me also, I remember when I was writing the book, I remember thinking at some point, oh, I don't want it to be gratuitous at all. I don't want it to be just blood and gore continuously. But obviously, I was probably being a bit pretentious about it. And I got to a point and I was like, no, you do need a bit of that. You do need to give the audience what they want. So yeah, I like a little bit of blood and gore.
Can I read a bit out? Can I read a bit out from chapter 1?
Yeah, you can. Oh my God, yeah, you can.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to read this out. This right, here we go. The head had been cut off just above the Adam's apple. Small hunks of bone were embedded in the ridged windpipe that jutted out among the shredded muscle and clotted blood. Yellowing fat and connective tissue had the look of raw, jointed chicken that had been left out in the air for too long. Henley stood up and breathed in deeply. The wind carried the briny, rotten scent of the river. And you seem like such a nice person.
Everyone says that. Everyone's like, you seem like such a nice person. And it's like, how can you write such gruesome things? And the funny thing is, I never really thought they were gruesome when I was writing them. I thought, this isn't gruesome enough. This is just quite tame. And it's only now I'm getting the feedback from the readers, and I'm having readers tell me the book kept them up at night. And I'm like, really? I'm like, that's really good, but I didn't think it was going to do that, but it has. So
that is the best review you can possibly have for a book like this. That they're turning the pages, they're staying up at night, and they're having night. That's job done, frankly, isn't it? That is job done.
That's what I want. Keep them up at night.
The really, really exciting thing about this is there was a 6-publisher auction. And we love hearing about this kind of, because this is the sort of thing that, we can only dream of as authors. So what was that? Were people phoning you up and saying they've gone to this and they've said this? And what was the experience like for you?
I was saying to a friend the other day, I didn't realise I was in an auction until my agent said, we're in an auction. Because I think, because it happened really quickly. When I signed with my agent, 2 years ago now, and I signed with my agent on my birthday, which is 29th of January for future reference. And then about 2 weeks after that, he sent the manuscript off to editors. And I think 3 days after he sent it off, we got our first offer, which was on a Friday. And then the Monday, we got our second offer. And the offers, I just wasn't expecting it. And then I think it was the Tuesday, he goes, we're in an auction. I'm like, are we? He goes, yeah, we're in an auction. And we had, I think initially it started off at 5, then it went up to 6. And then every day it was this is where we're at. And because this is all completely new to me, I said, I'm a lawyer by trade. So, I know how to deal with criminal cases. The publishing was completely alien to me. So all of this, I'm getting text message, right, this is the offer, this is what's happening. I'm like, oh my God. It's just the stuff we read about, not thinking it would ever happen to me. And I remember calling my brother at one point and I said to him, this is what the offers are, but we're not taking it. And he said, well, why aren't we taking it? Because it was all completely mind-blowing. And then obviously it goes to the next stage of the auction. And yeah, it's the best feeling. It's what you dream of when you're a writer and you get the deal. So being in an auction, then getting the final, this is who's won. And you're like, yay, someone's won the auction. And it was also nice meeting different publishers as well. And also going to places like Penguin. These are the books you grew up with. You recognise the sign, you recognise the Penguin. And going to their offices, all of that was like, I can't believe this is happening. I'm used to going to Belmarsh Prison and, to courts. I'm not used to sitting in publishers' offices. So no, it was a fantastic experience. It really was.
Brilliant stuff. Actually, I'm really interested in your first impressions of the publishing world, because we were going to mention this at the end, but like I said, we're recording this in February, and just today, the Publishers Association has put out a report that says representation of people from Black, Asian, minority ethnic groups in publishing has stalled at a static 13% for the past 3 years. So it is a very kind of white middle class world. How did you feel walking into that world, and what were your first impressions of publishing?
In a funny sense, because I read the same article this morning, and in a funny sense, the legal world was a lot like that. Right. Obviously, very white, very middle class. So in a funny way, it was kind of familiar to me, being in that sort of environment. But I was still surprised at the statistics in terms of the representation of Black Asian authors, and also the representation of Black and Asian authors just within publishing world itself. You expect it to be more because I live in London and I grew up in London and I live in a very diverse area. So there's that side of me that thought, okay, who I am and what I see and what I live with, I'm going to see that represented in the publishing world. And then you realise very quickly that it's not. But I'm hoping, because of everything that's happened last year with, Black Lives Matters and this very concentrated effort to increase representation, both in publishing in terms of authors, I'm hoping that the numbers change and increase. I mean, I'm very lucky. My editor, Manpreet, she's Asian, and I think she understands me. She understands my work. So it's good having that sort of dynamic as well. But I'm hoping it will. I expect it to change a lot. So in terms of the efforts that's been made last year, and hopefully they continue to make. But it's so important to see yourself represented, because now I write crime, and I said I've read crime since I was like 13 years old, and it's only the last few years and actually writing my own crime book, and I'm thinking, well, how many Black authors are there? Not in America necessarily, but in Britain. Like, how many Black authors are there? How many Black authors are there writing crime? And where are the Black leading characters, the protagonists in the book? And I don't think it should be like a concentrated effort, like you need to make sure everyone's represented, but it should just be normal. It shouldn't be someone shouldn't pick up the Jigsaw Man and it's a shock that the detective's a Black woman. That should just be, oh, she's Angelica, she's Henry, she's got some issues, and she's a Black woman. It shouldn't be a shock to anybody.
Excellent stuff. Now, you set this in Deptford, which is where you live. So was that simply because it's easy to research because it's on your doorstep, or did you want to say something about Deptford, or because you've got Ian Rankin has Edinburgh, it's like is that your turf now? Is that going to be where they're all set from now on?
That's my turf, and I think I made a deliberate point of setting it in Deptford. So I grew up here, I still live here, and I've always read Mark Billingham's books from the very beginning, but he's very much North London based. And there's a lot of books that when they are crime thrillers and they are set in London, they're always set around North London or in the city. And I thought, no, we need to give South London a shout out, and we need to give Deptford a shout out. And because it's an area where I've grown up and I've seen how much it's changed in terms of gentrification, but it's like I know the seedy sides of it. I know what happens on those little back corners, and I live so close, and I grew up by the river, so I live so close to the river. So I grew up, when I said I think in acknowledgements that I've seen bodies being pulled out of the river, and we were always told not to play by the river growing up, but we always went to play by the river growing up, and you'd see dead animals, and you grew up hearing stories about I think a trunk was found once with body parts found in it. Yeah, so you hear, this is the stories I've grown up with.
Another piece of the puzzle falls into place.
I think Deptford's a great area. And I said, you've got this contrast. I said, also I'm so close to Greenwich as well, and it's so historically relevant. So having that contrast, I'm like, no, it would be a sin not to use all that and have it in the book.
Brilliant stuff. Let's talk about how it started for, because this isn't your debut. You published a book in 2015 called Sisters, which is a very different book. And I believe the first draft you wrote as part of NanoWriMo. Can you tell us about that?
I did. It was funny. That whole year I'd taken redundancy. So I started working, so I was self-employed as a lawyer. So I had time to write, and I'd entered NanoWriMo, and the story came about because I said I watched really bad TV, and I've always said my explanations for that, because of the work I do, can be so dark and serious that I need really bad reality, Real Housewives of TV to watch that doesn't use up my brain cells. So I must have been watching Real Housewives, and I came up with this story. I wrote it for NanoWriMo, and I finished it. So I printed out my little certificate. I downloaded Scrivener with my discount code. Yes. And then I realised I did all that. Actually put the certificate on my wall. I've written a book.
Fantastic. Good for you. No, brilliant. You've got to celebrate these things,
You have to. Every moment as a writer, no matter how small, you should celebrate those achievements. So I wrote the book, and then I thought, well, I've got I had 50,000 words. So I worked on it. And it was just funny, at the same time, a friend of mine who's a barrister, he left the profession to write full time. So he writes sci-fi, and he was starting on the self-publishing journey. So we were kind of doing it together, and I ended up writing a short sci-fi story for his anthology that he published. So we started this off, and I thought, okay, I might as well publish it myself. It was at the time where self-publishing was blowing up. So I think you had the whole story of Andy Weir and The Martian, and how that was self-published in the beginning. So you had all of that happening. So I wrote the book, and then I did all the research. I found the editor, found the proofreaders, found the cover artist, and all of that is so much work. But I did all that, and then I got someone to typeset it for me. I found all that, and then put it on Amazon, and actually printed out the physical copies. I was like, oh my god, I've actually got a book, and the reviews were good. I had good reviews. Obviously my mum bought it. My mum did think I had to tell my mum the book wasn't about her because she's one of 5 sisters. So I had to tell her, no, it's not about you and my aunts. Because you weren't in a girl band the last time I checked. So, that was my first book.
What were the biggest lessons you learned from that?
You have to do your research from self-publishing. It's not easy. It seems easy to just write your book and just press send on CreateSpace, but it's not. The amount of time and effort it will take a traditional publisher to find the right editor, the right cover artist, you need to put that amount of work into it. You need to take it just as seriously as whatever your day job is, because I don't know if it's my just perception of it. I found that the reviewers of self-published books, they can be probably a lot harsher than a book that's traditionally published. So if you have got a spelling mistake in it, they're going to make sure that they tell you there's a spelling mistake. So
there's a definite bias there. Yeah.
So my bias is like, don't just take it as, it could be a hobby, but you need to put that effort, professionalism in it. And if you pay cheaply for a cover artist or for someone to proofread your book, like, you can find someone to do it for $5 if you want them to, but expect the level of professionalism you're going to get for paying $5 as opposed to actually putting the money in.
Very, very true. Very true. Now, you mentioned a day job there. You're, am I right? You're a criminal solicitor.
Criminal solicitor.
Yeah. And so, which I imagine that's not a part-time job. That's all-encompassing, how are you managing? We're always fascinated where we have people who have jobs, particularly jobs that are, really, really intense, and you're writing as well. How do you manage to balance both of those?
Well, at the moment, because I'm self-employed, I'm able to say, well, I was taking time out last year. And lucky enough, it coincided with a pandemic. So it wasn't. So I haven't lost that too much. But when I was working full-time, the day job I could be spending all day in the police station representing the client, or I could be doing a trial because I've got higher rights of audience, which means that I have the same rights as the barrister. So I go to the Crown Court. So literally I could be spending 2 weeks at the Old Bailey doing a trial. And there's all the preparation you have to do outside of going to court. And that takes up your evenings, it takes up your weekends. Mm. And when I wrote The Jigsaw Man, I was obviously going to court, I say full time, but I was also teaching as well in a law school. So I was teaching. Yeah, so I was teaching criminal law in the evening also. So like twice a week I was doing that. And then I was also writing the book. And there was one point when I said I was going to court, I was marking exam papers, I was teaching in the evening, and I was trying to get this draft done. And I have absolutely no idea how I did it. I'm surprised I didn't go mad. But the thing is, when you're committed to something, when you want to finish a project, you make sure that it's done. So you find those dodgy hours at lunchtime. So, if someone saw me in the canteen at court typing away, I may not have necessarily been typing away on a brief. I literally would have been working on the book. And I remember doing that, sitting in the back of court, and I'm writing a chapter while I'm waiting for my case to be called on. And obviously then use the weekends. But the reason why I loved my job so much is I always say it's good research, it's good background, it's good source material in terms of the clients I've represented and the cases that I've worked on. Even a really most basic case of someone stealing a joint of lamb from Sainsbury's, you can learn so much from that in terms of clients and how defendants and how they present themselves. And then obviously I know how the police present a case. So all of that, I hope, brings a level of authenticity into The Jigsaw Man.
Oh, definitely. Most definitely. When you were finding those small chunks of time to write, did you sort of target yourself? Did you say, I'm going to sprint for half an hour, I'm going to hit this certain word count? Did you set yourself little goals?
I've got this really mad system which is based on NanoWriMo, because you had 30 days to write 50,000 words. So I broke it down to, I think it's like 1,666 is a number I have in my head. And that was always like my target number for the day if I was writing for the day, because I know that's at least a chapter. So I would try to use that as my guide. And if I went above that, that would be great. But I know there's some days where, I'd sit in front of my computer. And if I got 250 words out for the day, then that was it. That was a good day. Some days it's hard. But as long as you write something, as long as you get something down, I think that's the most important thing. But I'm not very good at sprints. Like, I'm not very good at, I'm going to write X amount in an hour. I just have a guide for the day and then just use that.
Excellent stuff. Now, very exciting time. Your book's about to come out. Jigsaw Man has been optioned for TV as well. Can you tell us anything about that, or is it all top secret? Or
it's still a little bit top secret. I can tell you it's been optioned by Monumental Television, and I am talking to the author who's adapting the screenplay now. So we've had some conversations about that, but that's just where we are at the moment. But that is exciting because that all happened. I think I got the publishing deal in March, and I think by July it'd been optioned for TV.
Wow.
So, yeah. This has been a very, very crazy journey. Considering I went from self-publishing, doing it myself, and I was quite content doing it myself. And I thought, well, once I've written this book, if I have to self-publish it myself, that's not a problem because I can do it. But to have the contrast of being traditionally published and seeing how it's a completely different engine, and then obviously having the book option for TV. It's been mind-blowing. If I sit,
Now, what's next? Are we going to see more from the world of the Jigsaw Man, Detective Inspector Angelica Henley? We're going to have more from her?
You're definitely going to have more of Angelica Henley. I just sent book 2 off to my agent and my editor. So they have that now. I'm giving myself a little break because obviously the book's going to be launched in lockdown, so I've got to get my front room ready for my party of one. But then I'll be starting on book 3 also. So there will be there's definitely a series.
Brilliant. You mentioned briefly there that you wrote for a science fiction anthology. Are we going to see a science fiction epic from you?
Please do.
I have one.
If you can find time.
Yeah. If I can
Brilliant.
find, well, I've always got like my secret. You can't see the rest of this room, but like I've got this comic book addiction. So like my dream is to work. I want DC Comics to like give me a call so I can write a graphic novel. But I do dabble a little bit in sci-fi. So the short story I wrote for that anthology, I want to extend it. So yeah.
Brilliant. DC, if you're listening,
get in touch.
Let's make this happen.
And I'm here.
Yeah, excellent stuff. Nadine, a real treat to speak to you today. Best of luck with the Jigsaw Man and everything else that happens. And let's speak to you again very, very soon.
I hope so. Thank you so much.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy.
Like I said, we recorded that back in February, but I'm really glad we waited because Jigsaw Man today in June is Amazon's #1 title in horror fiction today. So big congrats to Nadine on that. She's got all sorts of amazing reviews. So, launching in lockdown, but now a summer hit. So big congrats to Nadine there.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Nadine. Well, congratulations. And I loved hearing her story about the auction because, like she said, it's what every writer dreams of. But I love the whole psychology of auctions. And a lot of people don't realize what really goes on in an auction and why auctions become these kind of hotbeds of signing. but it's all to do with psychology. It's to do with what we've talked about a lot on the podcast, something called FOMO. For anyone who's not familiar with that term, it's fear of missing out. And I've seen it happen. Obviously, it happens a lot in the publishing industry. It happens a load in the music industry. You get a hot new band, one label gets whiff of them, and they're like, "Oh, let's try and keep this quiet. We'll see if we can sign them on the lowdown." And then the manager goes to the next label and says, "Oh, by the way, BMG have put in an offer," and then they're like, "Right, we're in." And then before you know it, everyone piles in, and it's kind of it's the most powerful situation you can be in as an author, because auctions obviously drive prices up, and you've got the bargaining chips as the agent and the author to maybe get some of those extra clauses that you want in the contracts. And I mean, You must have seen auctions a lot, Mark, on that. You might have been on the other end of them as working in Orion. How often did they happen?
Perhaps not as often as you think, actually. I mean, they happen a lot around about London Book Fair time, because everyone wants a story. That's the other thing as well. Some of these can be great press stories. So if an editor can say, "Hey, we paid a lot of money for this book at the London Book Fair, but that's because we believe in it. We're a leading publisher. Look at us. We get, cash to splash," that kind of thing. So there's a statement there as well from publishers too. But, so it's...
Well, it's also the beginning. It's the beginning of the marketing campaign for the book, isn't it?
Yes,
that's the first story that hits in some ways. And that then starts the buzz, maybe even a year before the book actually comes out. And that in itself, the perception of what might be a great book can actually turn it into a bestseller.
The ones I remember are, and these are usually celebrity memoir ones, where the agent might not necessarily be a book agent. They might have been, a manager or a film agent or something like that, who has a massively unrealistic idea of what publishers are willing to pay. But then publishers as you say, they think, well, so-and-so's paying this, and maybe we need to pay more. And then what happens is the management come to the sales department and say, we need to pay a bit more for this book. So those sales figures you gave us, do you think you could sell any more? So you start thinking, oh, can we? And there are books where on paper you think, we're never going to make our money back with this, But then something happens, you have a massive rights sale, or it just catches fire, or you lose a ton of money, which, happens. But that tends to be at the celebrity scale of things, because they like to have a couple of really big names at Christmas, celebrity memoirs, that they can say, "Hey, look at us, aren't we great?"
It's fascinating, isn't it? It's such a wonderful, wonderful situation to be in as an author. But I think it's super important to remember that where most people, especially new authors, they're desperate just to get some interest. And a lot of them, as soon as they get interest, they're like, "Oh, brilliant," and they sign. It's like, no, you've got one group interested. Now you go and tell all the others that you've got the interest, and that's what brings them. That's what actually gets the phone ringing.
Yeah, we're so needy, aren't we? But here's the thing with Nadine, and I think what we're seeing with Nadine, I think she's a great example of a kind of author we're going to see a lot more of in the future, because she paid her dues. She did NanoWriMo, or NanoWriMo, and Robin Stevens called it that as well, and I'm not sure which one is right.
Definitely Rimo, but what do I know?
she did NanoWriMo, Mimo. She did self-publishing, and she used what she'd learned from that to take her career to the next level. And I think you're going to see a lot of authors doing that. They're going to sort of dip a toe in NanoWriMo. They're going to learn how to finish a book. That's the first thing. Finish something, edit it, work on it, self-publish, realize that, either self-publishing is for me or it's not. Some people have a real knack for it. Other people, it's like, I don't want to do this. And then, and I think you're going to see a lot of people coming out of that generation, hybrid authors who've done a little bit of everything. And because of that, she'd, and as we said, she'd won competitions. She studied an MA in creative writing. Nadine's ticked every single box. She's worked really, really hard to get that auction. This isn't someone who's just walked in off the street and said, "I've got a book." She's really paid her dues. So she's a big inspiration. And I really do hope DC Comics give her a call. I'd love to see Nadine's DC comic, So it's she's really put the hours in.
Well, you're absolutely right, Mark. I think the thing we hear a lot about, and Nadine said it herself, it's such a lot of work to self-publish. We know that. We've been there. Yes. We hear about it on the show most weeks. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, it's just such hard work, self-publishing." But there's a value if you think about it. Like, what were the options that we had 20, 30 years ago as a new author? We had to get a deal with a major or a traditional or a boutique agent, but that was it. So self-publishing gives us the opportunity to just do something, move our career forward. And I think there's a value in, if people are kind of thinking, I'm just going to go for traditional and keep trying traditional. I think there's a value in at least trying to self-publish one story just to learn the process, because I think it makes you a better author for traditionals. Because if you understand the mechanics of how this works, nowadays traditional publishers are not just looking for a great author, they're looking for a great author who also kind of understands the process a bit, because we've become more involved in, I mean, if you look at what you've done with Crowfolk, Mark, I mean, you've been completely integrated in the promotional side of it, doing the book launches online and everything else. So it's almost like a team effort rather than this idea of the old school traditional, like, we're the publisher, we'll do all the work, you just bring us the manuscript and show up for book signings and the like.
A question we get asked a lot on the Bestseller Group and the Academy, and something we've had in lots of Q&As is, if I self-publish, does that make me less attractive to publishers? Is there a stigma? And I don't think there is at all anymore. At all. I mean, unless you've, I think good cover art helps. If you've self-published a book and you've got some terrible cover art, then, or even if it dies, you can still take that away. And you've done it and you've experimented, and you can take it down if you want. But I think, frankly, they're not worried about that. At least you've been through a process. At least you're showing a commitment to your writing. So I don't think it has that stigma at all anymore.
No, I think it might have done to begin with. And I think what's happened is traditional publishers have got enough amazing success stories of the self-published author who we then signed. And I must say, then there is, it used to be this idea of, who are you? You self-published, or are you going for traditional? And it was like, Man United, Liverpool. It's, you're two different like traits. But I think nowadays it can work either way. You could start, as we know, in traditional, and then go on and self-publish a book and still carry on doing traditional work as well. Or you can be self-published and then move into traditional, or you can do the hybrid, which is doing both, either at the same time. So there are no rules. And this is the most important thing for people to remember, is that it really depends. And this is one of the themes I want us to talk about a lot more. And we're starting to really talk about it in the Academy, is actually understanding what kind of writer you are. Not what kind of writer you, it's about acknowledging the writer you are. So, for example, Shannon Mayer, sold over 3 million books now, writes like a crazy demon when she writes the books, but she actually she kind of has a thing for the marketing. She likes, I wouldn't say, maybe it's a love-hate relationship, but she's good at it. And she splits a day, morning writing, afternoon marketing. And she'll probably always do that because she's really, really good at it. And she's got that fire in her belly. Some people just can't stand the marketing. And if that's the case, don't be put off by going self-published, because maybe you have to go through and break through that barrier. But your goal is ultimately to say, because I want to get a traditional deal, I want to go with a traditional publisher long term, but I'm going to do this just to kind of learn the process, and then I'm going to establish some of my career, and then I'm going to push for traditional. So there's always value in trying these things out, and know that it doesn't necessarily have to be forever, which I think a lot of people really get down on that idea.
Of course, we've discovered with some authors, you don't have to do any marketing. Like Philip C. Quaintrell, the fantasy author, he spends all his money using the same cover artist as Brandon Sanderson. And that's it. He pops it online and everyone goes, what the hell is that? And they buy it. So, and congrats to Philip. He's just finished the latest series of his books. And, when he came on the podcast and he was something like £1,000 a day. It's astonishing the money he's making, and he's not doing any marketing. So, folks, just all we're saying is, if this is your first time on the Bestseller Experiment, start with episode 1, work your way through, because this is it. It's a rainbow. It's a spectrum. There's no one way of doing this. Don't let anyone tell you that there is, apart from finish the damn book, get the book out there.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some definite principles to follow. Yeah. Now, one of the other things I loved about what Nadine said about, we talk about her incredibly busy schedule. I mean, let's just recap. She was sitting, waiting to do a court case. So I can just see her sitting outside on one of those, like, rickety old seats, writing a chapter of her book, which is phenomenal because, and I've heard this a lot. I've heard about people, I guess it's called snatching time. It's not like you can sit down and say, today I'm going to write between 6 a.m. and 12. I'll take an hour for lunch. And then it's like, no, I got 15 minutes in the school car park. Kids haven't got out yet. Right, let's do the 200 words. Or in Nadine's case. And I've heard a lot of people who just are able to write a book by squeezing it around their life rather than making writing central to their life. And the thing I love about Nadine's story, and we hear this happens too often to ignore, is that eventually she has enough success with her book that it will eventually she'll have the option, like, do I actually want to become a full-time writer? Like, I've got a TV series option now. She's got this, auction that's happened. She now has an option, but she would never have had that option if she hadn't written around her schedule.
Yeah, and I remember the gingerbread episode that we did, which is the charity for single parents, and there was a writing competition there. And they, single parents, as you know, Mr. D, face all kinds of challenges when it comes to writing. But they were, they're people writing on their phone on the bus into work. And again, grabbing 15, 20 minutes here, there, and wherever. And I think if you are passionate about it, you find that time, you want to tell that story. And if you've got, if you've got that drive, it can be done. And again, I'm not going to pretend it's easy. These are exceptional people, but that can be you, folks. If you're thinking, I just need to, there is a misconception, I think, that you need to take. I'm going to take the summer to write the great American novel. I'm going to, and I think, first of all, saying anything like that puts such a weight of expectation on you. I would rather you say, I'm a writer. Oh, what are you writing? Well, I write every day. If you write every day, you're pretty much in the same way that a musician who practices the scales every day, in the way that an athlete who trains every day. That's how you become good at, it's a 10,000 hours thing. That's how you get good at this stuff.
Here's an interesting thought. Are you more of a writer if you write 200 words a day every day of the year than if you write a novel once in 1 month in the year?
Oh, there's a can of worms. That is a can of worms. Pass Mr. D, the can opener, for the biggest jar of worms you've ever seen. That's interesting because obviously people do both, and both are completely legitimate. I know a lot of professional traditionally published authors who do that thing, and they will go away and write. I think it's because we see it on TV and film. Whenever it's always like in Four Weddings and no, not Four Weddings. What's the terrible one? Love Actually, terrible film. Where Colin Firth, he goes to away somewhere and he's typing with paper for some reason, because even that's set in the modern day, he's writing like he's got reams of paper flying everywhere, and the idea is, you go somewhere on holiday to write. Or Stephen King Misery, where he goes, finishes in a hotel, remote location, but that romanticizes the writing process, whereas actually it's a lot more quotidian, it's a lot more everyday. You come in, you do your bit, and then you get on with your life. So my day is normally 7:30 to 9:30. I'm writing on project number 1, and then throughout the day I find places to work on other projects. But when I had a day job, it was my commute into work, half an hour on the train, an hour lunch break, commute home. 2 hours a day. I was very, very lucky to get that. When I was a sales rep for a publisher, it was my lunchtime lay-by. I'd park in a lay-by and write in a lay-by while scarfing down my lunch. That was how I got plays and scripts written as well. So, it's you just got to figure out where that little bit of day is that you can use.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I'm going to throw this open to debate. I love a good debate, Mark, but I want everyone to get involved. Let's talk about this on Twitter, on Facebook, BXP Team in the Academy. Let's talk about because this is my opening gambit for the debate. If you worked out in a gym for 30 days, you would get incredible strength. You might also injure your back because you might overdo it, right? But who would be stronger by the end of the year if you did say 20 press ups a day every single day of the year, or you worked out like a demon for 1 month? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I've got my own views on it, but we'll have a discussion about that later. Maybe we should do a whole episode on this, because I think it's a very interesting, which one helps you more as a writer in the long run, because there's pros and cons to both. Absolutely. But there's a lot of NanoWriMo fans out there right now who says, well, that's the only time that I write in the year, because it gives me that impetus and it's worked for me. And I think that's brilliant.
What I don't want to do is delegitimize, if that's a word, any one person's way. If that works for you,
exactly,
sweet, perfect.
It's almost like choose your own adventure, isn't it? It's
exactly.
You've got, and you in some ways have to try both to work out which works for you. You know what would be the best thing? A book a month, every month. That would be, that's the Shannon Mayer way of doing things. And that way you'd have like probably 100 books within 10 years at least.
As I've said before, I don't think Shannon Mayer is actually human. I'm pretty sure she's from an alien race that has come to the earth,
urban fantasy world,
to show us how it's done. Yeah.
if you wonder who we're talking about here and you think, who's Shannon Mayer? Episode 4, I believe, Mark. And we've got 2 more episodes in the first season. Brilliantly inspiring. She's fantastic. Lady. Go listen. Absolutely brilliant. The other thing I love that Nadine did is she printed a physical copy of a book. Yeah. It's something we always talk about. There is something, I still will always say this. I love digital. I mean, hey, I live in the digital world. Look at us right now on Zoom. But there's something magical about the physical, the tactileness of a book. Yeah. You can't ever replace that. As much as you love ebooks and as much as you love your Kindle, as an author, there is nothing quite like that moment where you hold that book in your hand, even if it's just the proof copy or the draft copy that you've run off Amazon or CreateSpace, or whatever it's called now. What is it now? KDP.
KDP.
I don't know. They keep changing. But isn't that an important? That's a very important milestone in becoming or believing that I'm now a writer, is holding that book, right?
It's possibly. I mean, the thing is, it's you're seeing a lot more authors going digital first, and not every one of them, even they're going with Canelo or one of those digital first, and a lot of publishers now have digital first imprints, so they're not always getting a physical copy of the book, even though you're published. And they can be earning a very good living doing that. So, but there is something extra about that. It's fascinating. I was reading today that I think it's in the States. I mean, over here in the UK, indie bookshops have done really, really well. Those that have survived lockdown and what have you, and they're thriving. And something similar is happening in the States, because that one. Borders, Barnes and Noble, all those big chains are gone from the States. So indie bookshops are now the only bookstores you will find selling physical books on the American equivalent of the high street, the strip mall, whatever it is. And there is the report goes on about the limited appeal of Kindle. So not everyone, people do like a physical book. Yeah. And it's interesting, having done the Miss Charlotte Quartet, which as I said, is 25,000 words. And there's a part of me thinking, I wonder if anyone would pay for a physical copy of that. So it's got little cogs whirring in my head.
Worth an experiment, Mr. Stay, I do believe.
I might have to run it past my publisher, because I think anything set in that world, they get first dibs. So
that's true. Yeah. Well, then that might be a great conversation to have with them as well, because they might say, "Well, let us take it."
Yeah, but you're right. Having something physical does make a difference.
Yeah, I kind of, by that I really meant, like, as an author, even if you just literally are printing yourself your own copy just to have on your shelf or to use as a proofread. There's something about that physicalness. One other thing about the North American market, which is interesting, in Canada, actually, weirdly enough, where I live, we've got 2 independent bookstores. One of them's just been taken over by another family. So they're all about community, and they're lovely shops. You can go in and, they're very supportive of local authors as well, which I love. But what I've also found is in Canada, we've still got what we call the big box publisher, and it's called Chapters. It's kind of like the equivalent of Barnes and Noble. But what I've noticed, and I do love Chapters, but what I've noticed is when I go into Chapters, now the first half of the bookstore, in quotes, is haberdasheries. You've got your Starbucks on the left, and you've got all your kind of comfy pillows, and you've got reading socks. You can buy your reading socks, and board games and chocolates, funnily enough, and artsy stuff. And then the second half of the store, this is a big store. The second half of the store is all the books, and it kind of reminds me a bit of what happened to HMV, because HMV was records and vinyl and tapes and CDs back in our day. But then it started to become like computer games in the far corner, and then posters, and then those funny little bobbly head. And it was all these kind of like memorabilia of films, and it just became this almost like this kind of, we need to start selling other stuff in order to survive. And I really hope that all these stores can survive in some ways, because it is obviously very hard competing with Jet.
It's usually a question of profit margin, because the profit margin on books, especially if you are competing on price, isn't great. And obviously, a bookshop, especially a big one, if it's on like 2 floors or whatever, the number of individual stock lines, all those books, they're on individual stock line, is as big as a supermarket that's twice the size of that bookshop. It's in terms of square footage and turnover, it's not a great equation. So if they're selling cards, they're making a massive markup on the cards. Those bobbleheads, the markup is pretty good. Certainly in HMV, it was headphones, I think, where they made a lot of money, because the markup on headphones, those big brand headphones devices, that you see, that they cost like $5 to make, and you're buying them for $80 or whatever. It's like sunglasses as well. I remember someone telling me, if you ever want to get rich, sell sunglasses, because they're massively marked. I digress. But so they are. Waterstones are the same here. You go. It's a bit more of a mix. So Waterstones are all about books. Front of stores, books. But by the counter, you've got, because we're coming to Father's Day in the UK, so you've got little gifts there for dad or whatever, and then board games, and then cuddly toys in the kids section and stuff like that. So it is a mix now. But that's what they got to do to survive.
I so hope that we don't enter a world where bookshops don't exist in a physical space. It would break my heart. Absolutely break my heart.
I think they do, but the indies are specializing, and they're finding readers online as well. So, Cole's Books, who did signed editions of the Crowfolk, they have a thing about signed books. They deliver them and beautifully wrapped with a bookmark and a ribbon and all kinds of stuff. So they're finding little niches. They're basically saying, let's not compete with Amazon. Let's do what Amazon cannot do, and they're doing it really, really well.
Here's a little idea I want to throw out to the world of authors. Is there a best-selling author out there that would be willing to write a new book and only market it in independent bookstores? So the only place you can buy this book, you can't get it on, digital. You have to go to your local bookstore to get it. That would be a very interesting. I mean, not that a major publisher would probably do that, because it wouldn't make sense to them. But if there was a best-selling author that was had gone, say, self-published, and they did an experiment to see just how many physical copies of their book could they sell, and I mean, I'm sure it would cause a major issue in terms of putting things on Amazon. I'm trying
to think if anyone's done it. It's ringing a vague bell. I'm trying to think.
I can't think of a major one that's happened.
You get exclusive editions. So if you go to, Waterstones, certainly again around Christmas time, they'll have exclusive editions. So there'll be coloured end papers, or there'll be an extra short story, or it might be a signed copy. It's a little more difficult with the indies, because they're not represented by one single body who can negotiate on their behalf. The wholesalers sometimes do stuff like that, but indies are indies, and it's trying to get them to agree on one thing is like wrangling cats. It's and they all want different things, which is fine. Some sell children's books, some sell crime books, some prefer to focus on literary fiction or whatever, or genre fiction. So they're never all going to band together in that way. But I'm trying to think if someone has done it. But Amazon might kick up a fuss, because they like to have a bit of everything. They like to be able to offer, because it's A to Z. That's their logo. It goes from A to Z on the logo. And they like to be able to offer everything. So they don't like being left out at all.
Yeah, of course. And I'm actually reading a couple of the Amazon books written about Jeff Bezos. One of them's called The Everything Store.
Yes.
And the other one's called Bezonomics. And they're fascinating. Absolutely brilliant read.
Yeah.
I mean, goodness me. But, one thing I did pick up on that, just as a very quick aside, both Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, avid readers as children. Avid readers. Like Jeff Bezos used to read, I think, 12 books in a month or something. And there's got to be science out there that have shown like.
So did I, but I'm skint. Relatively speaking.
But what has it done to your brain? You see, this is the thing. What's it done to your creativity? How do books nurture young minds? I mean, it's quite mind blowing. I know that there's a link, absolute link there between the amount that we read and how we see the world and how it opens up our creativity. It's wonderful. So thank you to all the authors who are writing books for all those kids to read. I mean, there's another reason to do your 200 words a day. There's some child out there who's going to read your words that you write today in maybe, a year from now or 6 months from now, or who knows, 10, 20, 50, 100, 500 years from now. And it will inspire them to see the world differently. It will expand their mind. And really, folks, when we sit down to write, that's what we're doing.
Yeah. One of my favourite moments as an author was at Herne Bay Sci-Fi by the Sea a couple of years ago. And I had copies of my books and I'm signing away. And this kid comes over, he's about 11 years old, and he sees the novelisation of Robot Overlords. And he went, oh, he said, did you write that? I said, yeah. He said, that's my second favourite film. I thought, I'll have that. And I signed it for him, and I gave him, that made my day. That made my day.
I know.
Well, it does. Your book will be someone's favourite book. That's the thing.
It will be, and you're also paying it forward, Mark, from all of those incredible authors you enjoyed as a child as well, right? And it's a part of the beautiful cycle of life and writing. So, Mark, we could chat about this all day, but we should probably jump into social media because there's been a bit of an interesting debate going on about previous, which is what always happens when someone takes a stream review, and I love that.
Well, this is the Dean Wesley Smith episode, and for the record, I love Dean Wesley Smith, but he did warn me. He said I might ruffle some feathers, but first of all, we had some great feedback from people so we got. Just to give you some context, Dean talks about writing in the dark, writing just sitting down and writing anything, not stopping, getting to the end. But more importantly, he doesn't use an editor. He doesn't listen to that critical voice. He just writes and puts it out there, and we talked about Heinlein's rules. Just go back and listen to that episode because it's an absolute brilliant story and interview. And we said to people, look, if you are one of Dean's, if you write like Dean, let us know, because we've not really heard from any listeners who have. So Harvey Stambro got in touch and said, he said, I found Dean's rules and Heinlein's rules about writing into the dark in early 2014. I trusted myself and gave writing into the dark an honest try. Since then, I've written over 60 novels, 9 novels this year alone so far, and we're halfway through the year. Well over 200 short stories. My novels and stories sell well, and for me, writing is the most fun I can have with my clothes on. There's nothing hard or dramatic about being a writer. It's simply great fun. And if I hadn't found Dean and learned to trust my creative voice, I still wouldn't be a writer at all. So thank you for that, Harvey. Thank you so much. We also had a note from Claire who wrote to us. She said, wow, a big fan of Dean's views on writing, and honestly, he's just legitimized how I write. I don't always know what the story is about, although sometimes I have an idea of the overarching story, but it doesn't always follow that as I write. I also let the characters lead the way. I never have a genre in mind when I begin a story, and that's something Dean was very keen on. I write whatever story wants to be told, whatever's in my head as I begin, nor do I know if it will be a novel, novella, or short story. So that's amazing. So that's great to hear from Claire and Harvey there. We also have people, saying, lots of love for editors and publishers out there, and I love my editors. I couldn't do without them. So, Julian Barr says, interesting, but I feel for the amazing editors he has worked with over the years. And to be fair, Dean has had the benefit of input from publishers and editors over there to get to, help get him where he is. Fadzi Casambira says, for the rest of us, an editor is essential, as is frequent revision of our first draft. Jan Carr, I love this. Jan says, I wanted to tell him to fup the fup off more than once during the interview. So, didn't land with everyone, but she thought it was a great interview, interesting perspective. So, yeah, lots and lots and lots of views on this. Joe Ruiz, who's on the Academy as well, he said, excellent interview. I've heard his approach in other interviews, but the questions were spot on and focused. Some people love his approach, others don't. But my takeaway was enjoying the process rather than focusing on the end product. I think Joe nails it on the head there. So thank you all for your... That's just the tip of a rather large Titanic-sized iceberg of the correspondence we had on that. But it's always amazing just to, it was brilliant. We also have had a great response, just people piling on praise for the interview that came out last week with Sarah Moorhead and Stuart Turton, people sharing their inspirational teachers with us as well, which has been just heartwarming to hear. Teachers, just amazing, inspiring lots of authors all over the place. That's been great. So thank you to everyone who's got in touch with that as well.
Excellent. And if there's anything in this episode that's piqued your interest, made you think of something differently, or you completely disagree with, let us know, because this is what it's all about. This is, I think this is one of the new catchphrases of definitely of the Academy and certainly for the podcast. It's choose your own adventure, folks.
Yeah.
My favorite books growing up, what I read as a kid, Mark? I read all the Fighting Fantasy choose your own adventure books. That's what got me into books. I loved them. Yeah. So, but this is what it's about, folks. It's about choosing your own adventure. Being bold enough to go on that adventure, but knowing that there are more than one ways to do it, and you're a unique individual writer, and it's for you to discover. But you only discover by trying things out. You'll never know if you don't try, right? So, absolutely. So get out there, get adventurous, walk right into the dark, whatever you choose to do. And if you are interested in getting supported in your journey, the Academy is here to help you. It's an absolutely phenomenal journey for all of the authors that we've had with us so far. The feedback's been amazing. 93% satisfaction rate of all the people in there. We've created something which supports you at every level of your writing, whether it's coaching, the courses, accountability, and the inspiration of the community who are all there to help you. You can now get beta readers if you're looking for beta readers in it. It's just, there's so much more. But if you want to find out more about what the Academy is about, and if you want to join us in the next intake, which starts at the beginning of July this year, we're going to have a webinar on the 21st of June, Monday the 21st of June. So if you can join us for that, come and register for that at academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. So, Mr. Stay, people need to get in contact us. The best ways are...
Yeah, come and find us on bestsellerexperiment.com. There's a contact tab there. Or we're on Facebook, Bestseller Experiment, Twitter and Instagram at BestsellerXP. If you've enjoyed this episode, share it with your friends, tell your friends, sing it from the rooftops, shout it far and wide, or subscribe, rate and review on your podcatcher. Thanks as always to JD and Dave, our editors.
Absolutely brilliant stuff, and it's a lovely summer's day here today, Mark. Looking forward to hopefully getting outside a bit and enjoying a bit of this lovely sunshine as well, and I hope you have a good week in the UK. So it's a goodbye from Mark 1
and a goodbye from Mark 2. Goodbye.